At 69 years old, Earl Campbell speaks with the weight of a man who carried not only footballs, but the burdens of expectation, pain, and betrayal. To most, he was the Tyler Rose, a symbol of raw power wrapped in the frame of a running back who could bulldoze through entire defenses. But behind the highlight reels and the trophies lies a hidden ledger of grudges, scars, and truths he never shared with the crowd that cheered his every step. This is not the story of another Hall of Famer who basked in glory. This is the untold confession of a man who gave his body to the game, only to learn that loyalty and sacrifice rarely guarantee peace. The 5 hidden truths Earl Campbell finally revealed do not belong to the field alone. They belong to the men he clashed with, the organizations that failed him, and the choices that left him both a legend and a cautionary tale. Why did a man so loved by fans harbor such unshakable bitterness? What wounds never healed even as Canton enshrined his name in stone? Tonight, we step into the shadows of the Golden Age, peeling back the layers of myth to uncover the darker, colder truths. This is not just about football. This is about power, betrayal, survival, and the cost of greatness. Earl Campbell's story is not finished with his runs. It lives on in the grudges he never released. Earl Campbell did not arrive in the National Football League as a mystery. He arrived as a force of nature. From the fields of Tyler, Texas, to the national stage at the University of Texas, his legend was written in broken tackles, bruised defenders, and the thunder of a running style no one had seen before. He was not a dancer like Gale Sayers. He was not a technician like Walter Payton. He was a storm, pure and unrelenting. Drafted first overall by the Houston Oilers in 1978, Campbell instantly became the face of a city desperate for glory. Houston was a team that lived in the long shadow of the Dallas Cowboys, and Campbell was their answer. In his rookie season, he rushed for more than 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year and the league's most valuable player. He was 23, and the league was already bowing to his power. But Campbell's rise came with a cost. Every yard he gained was bought with punishment. His style was collision, not evasion. He sought contact, drove through defenders, and dragged them like weights on his legs. It thrilled fans, but it carved away his body year after year. Coaches and owners praised his toughness, yet few asked what it took to stand up after every hit. The fractures were not just in bone and muscle, they were in trust, in promises made and broken. In the late 70s and early 80s, football was still a league of bruisers, a place where pain was expected and silence was demanded. Players like Campbell were heroes on Sunday, disposable commodities on Monday. His relationship with coaches like Bum Phillips and his battles against defensive legends shaped his story. But so did the business side, where owners measured his worth in dollars, not in years taken off his life. Beyond the game, Campbell carried the pride of being a black athlete in Texas, during a time when representation carried both opportunity and heavy expectation. He was not just running for himself, he was running for Tyler, for Texas, for every young man told that brute force could make him a king. Yet the same culture that elevated him also left him vulnerable. It demanded he play hurt, demanded he endure, demanded he keep silent about pain and resentment. To understand the hidden truths of Earl Campbell, one must first understand this paradox. He was a man built for glory, yet trapped in a system that viewed him as expendable. He was beloved by fans, yet often betrayed by the very institutions that cheered him on. The stage was set not only for triumphs, but for conflicts that would define his legacy far beyond the touchdowns. This is where the legend and the grudge begin. Earl Campbell and Bum Phillips should have been remembered as the perfect pairing. Phillips, the cowboy hat-wearing coach with a plain-spoken charisma, believed in toughness, discipline, and power. Campbell was the embodiment of those values, a running back who ran through defenses like a sledgehammer through glass. Together, they gave Houston its most thrilling years, carrying the Oilers into the late 70s spotlight with the Louvier Blue era. For fans, it looked like family, but inside, cracks formed that never healed. The conflict began not in glory, but in expectation. Bum often said Campbell was the best football player he had ever seen. Yet those words became a burden. He pushed Campbell to carry the team on his back, game after game, season after season. In the 1979 playoffs, Campbell carried the ball 34 times against the Dallas Cowboys, battered and bruised, yet expected to keep delivering punishment. Houston lost, But the bigger loss was Campbell's body. The coach who praised him also demanded a workload that no man could survive for long. The fracture deepened in the early 80s. When Phillips was fired after repeated playoff disappointments, Campbell had given everything to his coach, believing they were inseparable. But in the NFL, loyalty is paper-thin. Phillips left, Campbell stayed. And with him came the realization that he was just another piece in a larger game. The man who had pushed him to greatness also left him with a body that aged far before its time. One iconic moment defined their relationship in the public eye. In a late 70s practice, reporters asked Bum why Campbell was not running wind sprints with the team. Phillips smirked and said, "If Earl Campbell doesn't run, we don't need to run." Fans laughed, taking it as proof of Campbell's greatness. But Campbell later admitted it was a double-edged joke. On one side, it highlighted his value. On the other, it reinforced that his only worth was what he did on Sundays. It was less about protecting him, and more about excusing the grind that wore him down. The truth is, Campbell never fully forgave the system that Bum represented. He respected the man, even loved him, but resented the demands. He knew Bum saw him as the ultimate weapon, yet not as a human who would live decades beyond the game. Years later, when Campbell needed a cane just to walk, when his knees screamed with every step, he remembered the carries that could have been shared, the plays that could have been spared. Cold truth. Bum Phillips built Earl Campbell's legend, but he also built his downfall. For Campbell, the grudge was not anger at one man. It was the bitterness of realizing that even those who praised him most were willing to sacrifice his future for present glory. He never forgave the toll. For every highlight Earl Campbell created, there was an owner counting the profits. To fans, Campbell was the Tyler Rose, a hero who lifted Houston onto the national stage. But to the men in suits, he was a business asset, a commodity whose worth was measured in ticket sales and television ratings. This was the hidden truth that gnawed at Campbell. The game he loved was also an industry that consumed him. The Houston Oilers' ownership embraced him as a savior, but their loyalty never extended past the ledger. They rode his back through 3 straight playoff seasons, asking him to carry the ball 300 times a year. They sold jerseys, filled stadiums, and built the brand on his bruised shoulders. Yet when his body broke down, their support turned cold. The same men who had promised him stability and respect suddenly questioned his value when injuries slowed him. The turning point came in the early 80s. Campbell, once unstoppable, began to feel the toll of relentless collisions. His rushing numbers dipped, and instead of gratitude, he faced whispers. Was he finished? Was he soft? The very ownership that had demanded his punishment now looked for a way out. In 1984, they traded him to the New Orleans Saints, a move that shattered his bond with the city that had once adored him. For Campbell, it was proof that in the NFL, loyalty was an illusion. There was one moment that cut deeper than the trade itself. During negotiations, Campbell realized the Oilers were not even fighting to keep him. They were eager to cash in before his decline became permanent. To a man who had sacrificed his body for Houston, it was betrayal dressed in business clothes. The message was clear. Once you can't carry us, you're expendable. The iconic image of Campbell dragging defenders downfield was the same image the owners used to sell season tickets. But when he needed support, when his knees gave out and his back screamed, those owners were nowhere to be found. Decades later, Campbell would speak openly about how players of his era were discarded, left to deal with pain and medical costs, while teams moved on to the next star. It wasn't just his story, it was the story of a generation. Cold truth. The owners gained millions from Earl Campbell, but he paid the price in blood, bone, and decades of pain. He never forgave them for turning his sacrifice into profit without honor. To understand Earl Campbell's grudges, one must look beyond Houston and into Dallas. The Cowboys were not just another team, they were America's team, a shining symbol of glamour, wealth, and national attention. For Campbell and the Oilers, they were the looming shadow, the reminder that no matter how many yards he ran, Houston would always live in second place within Texas. Campbell's rivalry with the Cowboys was more than city pride. It was personal. As a boy from Tyler, Texas, he grew up in a culture that worshipped the star on the helmet. But when he arrived in Houston, he became the battering ram meant to challenge that empire. The Oilers and Cowboys met in fierce battles, including the 1979 AFC Championship run that ended with Houston heartbreak against Pittsburgh, but always carried the undercurrent of Dallas comparisons. Every carry Campbell made was measured against the glitz and polish of Tony Dorsett, the Cowboys' star running back. The clash came into full view in the Astrodome and Texas Stadium. Campbell was grit, mud, and pain. Dorsett was speed, style, and elegance. They embodied two different visions of football. Fans debated endlessly. Who was better? Campbell never said much publicly, but deep down he resented the constant comparison. He knew he took more punishment, carried a heavier load, and yet never received the national spotlight Dallas enjoyed. The defining moment arrived in a Monday Night Football showdown in 1978, when Campbell rushed for 199 yards against the Miami Dolphins. The performance electrified the league. Yet in Texas, conversation quickly shifted back to Dorsett and the Cowboys. Even in his greatest triumphs, Campbell felt overshadowed by the team up north. To him, it was a bitter reminder that he could never escape the Dallas Stars' glow. The most painful wound came in the 1979 playoffs, when Houston's dream season ended in the conference championship. Though they lost to Pittsburgh, many believed the Oilers were destined to face Dallas in a Super Bowl that would finally settle the Texas rivalry. It never happened. Campbell's body was battered, his carries exhausted, and the chance slipped away. Dallas remained the darling of the state, while Houston faded back into the shadows. Years later, Campbell admitted the Cowboys represented something more than just a rival. They were the symbol of what he never had: national adoration without constant sacrifice. He respected their success but never forgave the way their dominance kept his legacy buried in comparison. For every accolade he earned, there was always the reminder: he was not Tony Dorsett, and Houston was not Dallas. Cold truth. The Cowboys defined the ceiling of Earl Campbell's glory. They were the reminder that no matter how many defenders he bulldozed, he would always be fighting uphill against the shadow of America's team. The grudge lingered, not in anger toward Dorsett himself, but in the bitter reality that geography and perception kept his legend smaller than it deserved to be. He never forgave the shadow. For Earl Campbell, Houston was more than a team. It was home. The Astrodome was the cathedral where he became the Tyler Rose, the hero who carried an entire franchise on his back. Fans filled the seats wearing Columbia blue, chanting, "Luvia blue," and believing Campbell could bulldoze the Oilers to a Super Bowl. But behind the cheers, behind the painted faces, there was a betrayal that Campbell never forgot. The betrayal came not from the field, but from within the organization. In the early 80s, after Bum Phillips was gone, and Campbell's body began to feel the grind, the Oilers began to distance themselves from the man who had defined them. Instead of finding ways to extend his career, they leaned harder, demanding carries even when he limped into practice. The same city that celebrated his collisions began to whisper about his decline. The very management that had promised him loyalty traded him to the New Orleans Saints in 1984. That trade was more than business. For Campbell, it was exile. He had given his youth to Houston, running through defenders until his legs buckled, and the payoff was a cold phone call telling him he was no longer wanted. The fans still loved him, but the organization showed its true face. To Campbell, it was a knife in the back. He wasn't just traded. He was discarded. The iconic image of his betrayal wasn't on the field. It was the sight of Campbell, stunned, packing his bags while the Oilers turned the page. To him, it was proof that in the NFL, you were only as valuable as your last yard. The bruises, the broken ribs, the battered knees, meant nothing once the next season began. The same front office that had hung banners of his name now treated him as a relic. For years, Campbell spoke with bitterness about how players of his era were treated. No pensions, no real medical support, no gratitude for the damage done to their bodies. He would later walk with a cane before his 50th birthday, his knees nearly gone, his spine compressed, his hands shaking from years of contact. And the Oilers? They had moved on, chasing new stars, new seasons, leaving their greatest warrior behind. Cold truth. The Houston Oilers did not just trade Earl Campbell. They betrayed the very man who defined their identity. He never forgave them for sending him away, for proving that in pro football, loyalty was a slogan, not a reality. He carried that betrayal for the rest of his days. For all the grudges Earl Campbell carried, none cut deeper than the one he held against his own body. The man who once looked unstoppable, a freight train in cleats, learned too soon that the very strength that built his legend would also destroy him. Every step, every collision, every violent charge into a defender was a withdrawal from a body that could not replenish itself. In the end, Campbell's greatest rival was not a coach, not an owner, not a team. It was the betrayal of flesh and bone. In the late 70s, when he burst into the league, Campbell ran with reckless abandon. His thighs were tree trunks, his shoulders weapons, his helmet a battering ram. Defenders feared him. They spoke of how it hurt just to tackle him. But that style of play was a double-edged sword. He never dodged contact. He sought it. He punished tacklers until the punishment turned inward. By his late 20s, his knees were shredded, his back weakened, and his body was asking for mercy that the game never allowed. The moment that crystallized this betrayal came years after retirement. Campbell, once the symbol of raw power, needed a cane to walk. In public appearances, fans gasped when they saw their hero move slowly, carefully, as though every step carried hidden knives. He had given everything to the game, and the game had taken everything back. The image of Campbell, slumped and struggling to rise from a chair, was the final, haunting contrast to the highlight reels of him dragging tacklers like rag dolls. The cruelest part was the silence. In his playing days, pain was never spoken of. A true warrior did not complain. But in retirement, the silence broke. Campbell admitted the toll. Admitted that the game had left him broken long before his time. He once said that if he could do it all again, he would not. Those words shocked fans, but they revealed the hidden truth. Glory had a price too steep, even for the Tyler Rose. Doctors confirmed what his body already knew. The constant pounding had compressed his spine, damaged his knees beyond repair, and left him facing a lifetime of physical struggle. The man who once embodied the beauty of strength became a cautionary tale about its cost. He carried bitterness not only toward those who overused him, but toward the cruel mathematics of football itself. Strength fades. Pain lingers. And the body always collects the debt. Cold truth. Earl Campbell's greatest enemy was not across the line of scrimmage. It was inside his own frame, waiting for the day when the collisions of youth became the immobility of age. He never forgave the body that betrayed him. When Earl Campbell was traded to the New Orleans Saints in 1984, many assumed his career was finished. His knees were heavy, his body slow, and the Oilers had already written him off. But in New Orleans, he crossed paths with Archie Manning, another man who knew what it meant to carry a franchise on broken promises. Their bond was unexpected, and for Campbell, it revealed another hidden truth. Even friendship in the NFL could not erase the sting of decline. Archie was the Saints' quarterback, admired for his resilience but condemned to play for one of the league's weakest teams. He recognized Campbell's pain immediately. Both men had carried losing teams. Both had been celebrated while silently broken. Both had felt the weight of being everything to everyone. They connected not in victory, but in suffering. Yet even in that bond, Campbell felt bitterness. He saw Archie as a mirror, a reminder that legends could be wasted by franchises too blind to build around them. Together they tried to lift New Orleans, but the Saints were too far gone. Campbell's yards dwindled, Archie's passes fell incomplete, and the chapter ended in quiet failure. Cold truth. Campbell's friendship with Archie Manning was real, but it also reminded him of the futility of carrying a team alone. He never forgave the NFL for wasting warriors who gave everything but received so little in return. Earl Campbell's story cannot be told only through the highlight reels. To stop there would be to indulge in the myth while ignoring the man. His legacy was not just carved in the yards he gained, but in the scars he carried, the grudges he held, and the truths he later revealed. From the beginning, he was a contradiction. He was Texas pride, yet Texas pain. He was celebrated as unstoppable, yet constantly stopped by a system that demanded his body for its profit. He was loved by fans who painted their faces and shouted his name, but quietly discarded by the organization that owed him everything. In Campbell's life, glory and betrayal existed in the same breath. The grudges tell us why. With Bum Phillips, he felt both fatherly trust and ruthless exploitation. With the owners, he saw how the business side of football treated legends like commodities. With the Cowboys, he wrestled with shadows, knowing that perception and geography could diminish even the most heroic efforts. With the Oilers themselves, he lived the ultimate betrayal, traded like yesterday's news after defining an era. And finally, with his own body, he learned the cruelest truth of all. Power always comes with a debt. And in football, that debt is collected early. Yet to view Campbell only through bitterness would miss the full picture. For all the pain, his story still resonates as one of courage and identity. He carried not just the ball, but the pride of Houston, the pride of Tyler, and the pride of every young athlete who saw in him proof that strength could change destiny. His runs were more than yards, they were statements. They were collisions that told defenders, and the world, that greatness requires sacrifice. That sacrifice, however, became his lasting testimony. By speaking openly later in life about his health struggles, Campbell forced the NFL and its fans to confront the darker truths of the sport. He was one of the first stars to reveal publicly that he regretted the price he paid, saying if given the chance, he would not choose football again. Those words shocked the faithful, but they carried weight. They forced fans to see that the legends they adored were not superheroes. They were men. Fragile beneath the helmets, Campbell's legacy also extends beyond the field. In how he reshaped the conversation around player health and respect, his struggles became part of a broader movement, as former players demanded better pensions, better medical care, and acknowledgement of the damage done to their bodies. In this way, his pain became advocacy, and his voice became a weapon as powerful as his stiff arm once was. There is also the undeniable beauty of his game. Even today, reels of Campbell running over defenders are played with awe. He remains the symbol of raw football power, the kind of player who could not be replicated. Coaches and players still speak of him as a standard of toughness. Younger generations who never saw him live still gasp at the footage, wondering how a man could carry entire defenses on his back. That awe keeps his name alive, even as his body slowed. But the true measure of Earl Campbell is in the paradox. He is both inspiration and cautionary tale. He is a reminder of football's glory and its cruelty, of how fame can be both a crown and a curse. His grudges were not pettiness. They were reflections of a man who gave everything and demanded honesty in return. He did not forgive easily because he understood the cost of forgiveness when betrayal had been so deep. In 2020, Campbell turned 65, walking with canes, his frame carrying decades of pain. And yet, when asked about his legacy, fans did not speak first of the bitterness. They spoke of the nights when he electrified stadiums, when he made them believe anything was possible. The truth is, both sides coexist. He was the Tyler Rose, blooming brightly in youth, but fading too quickly under the weight of the game. Cold truth. Beyond trophies and glory, it was betrayal, grudges, and sacrifice that defined Earl Campbell. And that is why his name remains more than a statistic. It remains a story, a caution, a celebration, and a confession, all at once. Earl Campbell's journey forces us to look deeper than the highlight films. Behind the stiff arms and broken tackles lies a man who carried more than a football. He carried a city's hopes, a franchise's weight, and the scars of a game that demanded everything but gave little in return. His 5 hidden truths are not just his story. They are the story of football's golden age, when legends were made and broken on the same field. Now, the question turns to you. Which of these truths struck you the hardest? Was it the heavy hand of Bum Phillips, pushing a young star beyond the limits of flesh? Was it the betrayal of the Houston Oilers, casting aside their greatest warrior when his body faltered? Was it the shadow of the Dallas Cowboys, dimming his shine no matter how brightly he burned? Or was it the silent enemy, his own body, that finally brought him down? These are not easy truths to face. They remind us that every cheer from the stands has an echo, and in that echo lies pain, sacrifice, and sometimes bitterness that never heals. But it is in uncovering these truths that we truly understand what it meant to be Earl Campbell, the Tyler Rose who bloomed with brilliance and endured with scars. If you found meaning in this story, if you believe the untold side of football matters as much as the trophies, then join us. Subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. Here, we uncover the confessions, betrayals, and legacies of the game's greatest icons, because their stories are not just about football. They are about life, about cost, and about the truths history tried to bury.